You can leave the house, but never sleep anywhere else. Countless theories buzzed through my head as I drove down the highway. Fragments of scattered visions. Did Paul kill Zach in a drunk driving accident? Did Paul wire up the shattered coat rack, crawl through the tunnel, and set it back in my house? Was Paul a servant of the intruder? Was I becoming a servant of the intruder? After my clusterfuck of a vision, at least a few things made more sense. Sort of, at least. Not only was the intruder connected to its victims, the intruder's victims were seemingly connected to each other. Maybe it was some kind of hive mind. Maybe it was turning people into intruders themselves. At this point, it really seemed like anything was possible. It felt like I was on the verge of figuring this out, finally piecing everything together, but I'd been feeling that way for a while now. And then I thought back to the way Paul's eyes moved outside the diner all those days ago, like somebody had jumped into his head, taken a quick look around, and then jumped back out. Of course, it was me. I'm the one who jumped into Paul's head and looked toward myself. The nightmare logic of everything made me nauseous, like a carnival ride with no exits, a paradox web of chaos and madness, with answers always hiding one step out of reach. Answers that only led to more questions. Questions that only led to more confusions. And above all this was yet another question, something I know you're wondering too. Who was the old friend in Paul's house? The person he owed a favor, the person he was supposedly taking care of. Was it my childhood friend, Zach? Insane to even consider. Yes, I know. But hear me out. During my sporadic visions, I saw a green bike through Paul's eyes. The exact same bike my friend was riding when he died. Did Paul hit him? Did he hit him all those years ago? Did he find Zach barely alive on the side of the road, bring him back home? Was he keeping him alive to this day with medical equipment and military training? Was Zach Paul's so-called old friend? The guest keeping Paul's intruder at bay? Did the timelines, did they even match up? It was possible. It was crazy, though. It was crazy to even consider. What are the chances? Paul happening to live across the street from me all these years later, how would the police not have found out? Maybe this entity had been involved in my life for longer than the last few weeks. Maybe the intruder orchestrated everything from the start. A conductor, leading a bizarre and dissonant symphony devoid of purpose. Now that I thought about it, there was a vague familiarity about everything. Like constant déjà vu. Like that feeling one gets around death. You'll know it if you've ever survived a bad car accident or faced something potentially terminal or held someone's hand while they lay on their deathbed. You see part of the abyss. You finally realize, maybe for the first time, that at some point, you won't exist anymore. Maybe you never existed to begin with. In the words of Max Schumacher from Network, death becomes a perceptible thing with definable features. Before all this, I never feared death. There were times I even welcomed it. That's easy to say when death is sitting off in the distance, caged behind bars. But when the end of everything is standing just 10 feet away, looking you in the eyes, breathing fog out its nostrils. My phone started buzzing in a cup holder, slowly spinning around as the screen lit up. Somebody was calling me. I pulled into the lot of a nearby gas station. Buster's Better Gas. I called them back. "Bradley?" said the voice on the other end. "Brandon." Oh, Brandon. Doy. It was Howie. Of course. What is it, Howie?
Oh, no, not much. Just checking to see if you're okay. Haven't seen you in a while.
I'm fine. I've been running errands.
Oh. You weren't here last night?
No.
Huh.
What?
Well, somebody tore down your art thing.
Art thing? I'd already forgotten about my excuse for the barricaded door.
The basement door. Whole thing's gone, frame and all.
Oh. I said, trying to sound calm. Yeah, I paid some guys to take it out. I lied.
In the middle of the night?
Yeah, guess so. If that's when they showed up.
Well, I went to bed and the door was there. And I woke up and the door was gone.
I guess they were quiet, I said, the lie growing more absurd by the second.
I'll say, I'm a light sleeper, too.
He chuckled.
Anyways,
Howie continued,
I'm just calling to ask if it's cool if I crash a few more weeks. I'll pay you rent once I get the money.
Yeah, Howie. Don't worry about it. Is that it?
Yeah. See you, Brandon. Thanks again. It really means a lot.
I hung up. Fantastic. Now the basement door was gone. So much for slowing him down. In all the chaos, I still hadn't realized my violation of rule number 8. You can leave the house, but never sleep anywhere else. The importance of this rule cannot be overstated. Looking back, that would probably explain the missing basement door and a few other things to come. My thoughts drifted back to Mitch. I knew he knew a lot more than he was letting on. I still didn't trust him, but I trusted him more than Paul. Low bar. I know. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. 5 tones rang out. Straight to voicemail. Mailbox full. I called again. Same thing. I called again. 2 tones rang out. Silence. He cut the call short. Mitch was ignoring me. Time for plan B. Inside the gas station, I bought a cheap burner phone and a pack of smokes. Sure, I quit a few months back, but I needed something to calm my nerves. Besides, I'd quit again after this pack. Stop judging me! Back in my car, I lit up my smoke and called Mitch on the burner phone. He wouldn't recognize the number this way. I hated being stalkerish, but my life literally depended on it. 3 tones rang out and Mitch answered.
Hello.
Mitch, please, don't hang up. Silence, and then,
What do you want?
I'm sorry I spoke with your... I stopped myself from saying Dad. The neighbor, I just...
What do you want?
He repeated, losing patience. I need to talk. Just one more time. In person? He sighed.
I've already said too much. Just keep following the rules, ignore everything else, ignore Paul.
Mitch! Please! I'm literally losing my mind over here. Please!
What did you tell the neighbor?
Barely anything. I just said...
You know what? Never mind.
He sighed again.
3 Baker Street. Ring me when you get here.
He ended the call. Mitch lived about 40 minutes away in a small town off the interstate. One of those towns where Main Street's nothing but a graveyard of pre-Walmart family shops. Survival of the cheapest. I pulled up to an old and gray concrete apartment building that looked straight out of Soviet Russia. I checked the address. This was the place. Lugging my crutches out of the back seat, I climbed out of the car and shut the door. Thanks to crashing into the roadside barrier, a heavy indent was scraped into the side of my car. Great. I double-checked my pockets. Phone, check. Switchblade, check. Now I brought my chrome switchblade everywhere, just in case. The interior of Mitch's place looked nearly 70s to me. Open design, cut down to the middle, half kitchen, half living room. Between them, a bar with rickety stools. Something strangely familiar about it. Déjà vu again. Mitch looked a little better than the last time I saw him. Still tired, though. "Hey, Mitch," I said, forcing a smile as I took off my coat. Silent. Mitch stood about 6 feet away. He strode back into the kitchen and started scrubbing dishes in the sink. I pulled the door shut behind me. Mitch scraped grime off a cast-iron frying pan, his back turned to me. I walked up to the edge of the kitchen and looked around. His place was tidy, like a hotel room. "What did the neighbor tell you?" said Mitch, referring to his father. "A lot." "You believe him?" "I don't know." Mitch sighed, tossed the dishes down, and turned off the sink. Shaking water off his hands, he spun around and leaned back against the countertop. "So what do you want from me?" he said, crossing his arms. "I have some questions." Some was an understatement. "Okay. I didn't know where to start. Last night, I almost ran into a bear on the number 7. I swerved, hit my head on the window, blacked out for a second, and then you snapped into other people's minds, saw things from the past, maybe even the future." I looked at him, surprised. "Yeah, I mean, more than that, but..." Mitch shook his head as if to say I expected as much. "What does it mean?" I said. "Look, what you're doing right now, you being here, this whole rabbit hole of trying to find the truth, it's not healthy. The more obsessed you get, the more crazy you become, the crazier you are, the easier it is to control you." "Control me?" Mitch ignored the question. "Stop expecting some priest or medium to come in and explain what's going on. Nobody is gonna show up and tell you how this thing spawned from an ancient curse or some other bullshit, and that the only way to kill it is to sacrifice a firstborn or pray to Jesus," he said mockingly. "That's not what this is. You can't reason with something that doesn't think. The only thing you can do is follow the rules and put off more time between now and..." He trailed off into morbid silence. "If you think this is going to end all tied up with a neat little bow, you're going to end up severely fucking disappointed." As if I wasn't already. Mitch looked up at the ceiling, considering his next words carefully. "There's a good reason I've been so vague about everything. The more involved you are, the more you know, the more you share, the more you search for answers, the more it slithers into your life, into your thoughts, your dreams, everything." Mitch rubbed his jaw. "I barely escaped it." He looked across the room and stared at the door behind me. I glanced back over my shoulder. There was a floor-length mirror on the door, partially obscured by my coat. "After it took my dad," Mitch continued, "I almost got pulled in. I started researching, investigating. That's when the visions started, like what happened with you in the car. The intruder feeds you these little snippets of random moments. All of them, they feel like they might be connected, like they should have a reason, and maybe they do. But just because something has a reason doesn't mean it's a good one. What's going to happen to me?" "It's already happening," said Mitch. "You're becoming a servant of the Tulpa or whatever it is, and the worst part of it is, you'll still feel in control, but you won't be. Soon enough, you'll start breaking into other people's houses at night, leaving coat racks in the basement. trying to tell other neighbors about it. Maybe you've already done it. And forgotten. And then you'll be telling neighbors not to worry about it, telling them to work on themselves, telling them it's all in their head. Even telling them your life got better ever since the intruder showed up. Maybe theirs will too. How do you know all of this? I don't. It's all theory. At the end of the day, who the fuck knows anything about anything? Who knows? Brendan, who knows what this thing is? Maybe it's feeding off of this chaos. Maybe it's working towards something bigger. I don't know. I don't want to. Not anymore. I wasted too many years searching for answers, believing the key to all of this was always just around the corner. A satisfying revelation where everything would finally make sense, but it never came. Every answer only led to more questions, more confusion, more obsession, more suffering. How did Paul really die? When I was a kid, after Mom took us and moved out, a few years went by and Dad started getting his life together. Stopped drinking, stopped leaving creepy notes in people's shoes, got on some good meds, etc. So Mom, after some gentle pushing from my sister, calls him up, asks him out for coffee. Mitch went silent, eyes flicking back and forth across the wall behind me. That same night, after the phone call, Dad gets shit-faced for no reason. Drives up to the Ballery Cliffs. Same lookout he and Mom used to go stargazing at. Mitch grimaced. So he drives full speed towards the cliff edge and slams bumper first into a barrier post. He shook his head. Believe it or not, he wasn't the first person to try and drive a car off the Ballery Cliffs. City put up the posts a few months prior. Mitch pressed his tongue into the side of his cheek, thinking. So anyways, Dad's still drunk as hell, passed out, face in the airbag. Mitch pushed off from the counter, stepped over to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Gas leak catches fire. Dad burns alive. Mitch tapped his knuckles against the table a few times. Police said he was out cold, didn't feel a thing, but I knew enough to know that wasn't true. I saw the corpse in one of those visions, mouth wide open. Mitch opened his own to show. I'm no expert, but people generally don't scream when they're asleep. Mitch slapped the table and ran his hand back and forth a couple of times. So we make arrangements to sell Dad's house. It's the weekend, we're moving stuff out, and then... He paused, looking directly at me. There comes Dad, riding a brand new motorcycle. He's all confused, too. What are we doing with the stuff, you know? Mitch breathed out his nose. Said he was on a trip out of county last few months. Said he just got back. Mom loses her mind. Hell, we all lose our minds. Dad's back from the fucking dead. Mitch looked away, his eyes watering slightly now. He stamped his foot against the laminate flooring. The coroner's report, the police, everything. It's like none of it even happened. Mom was hysterical, screaming at the police station, saying they were trying to gaslight us. They weren't, but I almost wish they were. They said the documents never existed, at least not anymore. State almost took us away from her for insanity, so she stopped talking about it. We all did. Telling people you believe in ghosts lands you in an awkward conversation. Telling people your dad is back from the dead lands you in a psych ward. He scoffed. The thing that really fucked with me, aside from the obvious, was his hands. Mitch held up his hands and spread his fingers. 10 fingers, including the one he shot off in the fucking basement. Mitch looked at me again. This thing bent reality over us like a fucking wire. Like it bumped us into a parallel world or something. Mitch looked away again, staring at the kitchen cupboards as he spoke. Dad, or whatever replaced him, kept trying to reconnect with us. But we wouldn't have it. We moved cross-country, cut off all ties. Mitch sighed. Things got a little better after that. Distance helped, especially back then. He trailed off into silence. What made you come back? My sister. Evelyn. She was convinced the intruder followed us after Dad died. After we moved, she thought it was trying to possess her, take over her thoughts. Evelyn ended up taking her own life a few years back because of it. Overdose, plastic bag over the head. He trailed off, eyes filled with painful memories. I just wanted to find a way to stop this. Make sure it didn't happen to anyone else. I'm sorry. Mitch smiled sadly and gave a little shrug. So I started asking around Dad's neighborhood, low profile, asking if people had seen anything, heard anything about my dad. Everyone there was so fucking weird. Weird in similar ways, too. Tics like... Mitch rubbed his forehead with the back of his thumb to show. People forgetting random words, their eyes lighting up randomly and looking around as if somebody else was in their head. Same stuff I noticed with my dad, only more extreme, like the thing from the basement was spreading. Taking over the whole fucking town like a virus. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable at the word. How did you figure out the rules? I didn't. I mean, not fully. Those were just things that seemed to slow it down, at least in my dad's case. Before we left him, I found it all scribbled up on a napkin. Dad, for all his flaws, he's really fucking smart. Logical. He would have tested things out, experimented, figured out exactly what the entity reacts to, doesn't react to. So the more you know, the more he controls you? Maybe. It's only a theory. And I'm basically fucked no matter what I do. Mitch stepped up from the table, strode over to the kitchen sink, and stared out at a brick wall view. He sighed. Look, Brandon, I should have been more honest with you before, but you want to know the truth, right? Yes. This has been over and done with from the start. I didn't respond. Ever since you snapped that coat rack in half, it was game over. I blinked. He looked back at me over his shoulder. I didn't tell you that because I didn't want you to panic. The calmer you are, the saner you are, the longer it takes for this thing to get a hold of you. Get a hold of me? You're becoming a part of it now. Just like my dad, just like the neighbors. And there's nothing I can do to stop it? Mitch shook his head and looked back out the window. You should leave, he said, resting his hands onto the countertop. But I still don't leave! He snapped, his voice booming with surprising loudness. I shook my head, crouched back for the door, pulled on my coat, and wrapped my hand around the doorknob. Thanks for the help, I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. I turned the knob, but it was locked. Weird. I unlocked it and tried again. Still stuck. Almost like somebody was pressing their weight against it from the other side. Mitch? No response. I looked into the mirror on the door. Behind me, Mitch, with his back turned, now stood in the corner of the kitchen. Pin straight posture. Hands covering his face. Like somebody playing peekaboo. Mitch? I said, looking back over my shoulder. Suddenly the room shifted darker, but the lights didn't go out. Everything just dimmed into slow motion. Mitch's left hand shot straight up into the air, as if being pulled from above. Then his right hand. both hands straight up in the air, standing on his tiptoes now. I watched in wide-eyed horror. Suddenly his arms swung to his sides like an invisible straitjacket wrapped around him. Then he stood there motionless. Then he burst into coughing. Hunched over and staggered toward the sink, rubbing his forehead as he went. "You okay?" I said, taking a few careful steps forward. He threw a hand back, motioning me to stay away. I did. But his desperate wheezing and coughs only grew worse. Was he choking? He thumped his chest until finally something flew out of his mouth and plopped into the dirty sink water. "I'm okay," he gasped. "I'm okay." I glanced back toward the door. Mitch, back still turned to me, plunged a hand into the soapy water. Fishing around for whatever came out of his throat, he froze and his eyebrows raised. Slowly, he lifted something out of the water. It was an object about the size of chapstick, but I couldn't tell what it was from the distance. "What the fuck?" Mitch whispered. His hand suddenly swung to his sides again. The object flew to the floor, slid across the kitchen, and slowed to a stop in front of me. It was a dismembered finger. Mitch staggered back from the sink. 7 quick steps. He straightened up into pin-straight posture again, tried to speak, but only gargled whimpers escaped, like he was being suffocated. I stepped backward to the door, eyes darting around the room for another escape. No balcony, too many floors up for that anyway. "What the fuck? What the..." His voice cut off into a choking mess. His throat swelled up like something was pushing on it from the inside out. His head snapped back, forced him to look straight up at the ceiling, and then something pushed out from his mouth. Several somethings long and wriggling like worms. Fingers! Fingers with extra joints sliding out from his mouth and wrapping around his face, gaunt hands unnaturally large, squeezing together as they wriggled their way out of his mouth, like a face-hugger, pig-colored skin, scarred with burn marks. The same hands I saw wrapped around the coat rack all those nights ago, forcing Mitch's mouth open, wider and wider, until the corners of his lips started to tear, muffled, agonizing screams. Enough was enough. I spun around and shouldered into the door, using all my weight to crash into it again and again, all the while the horrific sight behind me reflecting on the door mirror. Hidden by shadows, something barely visible, tall and fetus-like, was forcibly climbing out of Mitch's body, dripping with blood and guts, pushing what was left of Mitch's skin down like somebody climbing out of an undersized wetsuit. Disgusting. Horrific. Finally, the door broke open. I stumbled into the hallway and slammed into the opposite wall. One of my crutches fell back into Mitch's apartment. I single-crutched the fuck out of there, but the hallway was different now, stretching on for eternity in both directions, growing darker and darker. I didn't have time to think about it. I just kept pushing forward, hobbling down the increasingly narrow passage. Behind me, the sound of staggering footsteps getting closer all the while. "Brendan! Wait!" A small, whimpering, wheezing voice cried out. "Please! That's when I realized the hallway's increased length was partially an illusion. A forced perspective miniature, gradually getting smaller and smaller as I went. I kept pushing forward, the ever lower ceiling scraping against my head, forcing me into crouching, forcing me onto hands and knees, crawling through this ever more miniature apartment hallway as the walls and whatever was chasing me pulled closer, the smell of burnt hair and gasoline growing stronger all the while. Darkness. The air changed, from dry air-conditioned cool to humid and dark. I didn't care. I just kept crawling, shuffling forward bit by bit, my back scraping against the now inexplicably dirt ceiling as I went. Up ahead, light suddenly appeared, less than 20 feet away, a room. Exhausted, I crawled faster, the sound of my own desperate breath bouncing off the walls around me. Almost there. Finally, I broke into the room and spun around. The tunnel was empty. As far as I could see, whatever had been chasing me was gone. For now, crutchless, I pulled myself to a nearby wall, slumped against it, and caught my breath. Eyes locked on the dark tunnel all the while, just in case. After a few minutes of catching my breath and calming myself down, I looked around. Dirt floors, plywood walls. This impossibly shifting tunnel had led me into the back corner of a basement. But not just any basement. Paul's basement. None of these rules are set in stone. The intruder seems to evolve and react depending on your actions. How I ended up in Paul's basement didn't matter right now. I just wanted out. Easier said than done, especially considering that I lost both crutches in the chase, but at least the light was on. For now. Let's pray to God the bunker door wasn't locked. Leaning against the concrete wall for support, I shimmied up onto one foot. Hobbling forward, I maneuvered my way through the maze, one painful step at a time. Tedious didn't even begin to describe it. Nearly 3 hours went by until I finally found footprints. The same footprints from when Paul and I were down here a few days ago. Something to follow. Thank God. Encouraged, I shuffled my way forward bit by bit when... a hollow thud. From somewhere deep within the maze. A fist. Thumping against plywood. My heartbeat quickened. I picked up pace, rounded another corner. More thumping. Quicker now. Closer, too. I hobbled faster, my limp cast leg dragging uselessly behind me. More thumping. 2 quick thumps each time now. Like a heartbeat, getting quicker and quicker as the sound moved ever closer. I rounded another corner, and finally, the exit was in sight. Somehow the bunker door was open, inexplicably open. Another suspiciously convenient blessing. With renewed vigor, I pushed forward. The thumping echoed in the hallway just behind me now. Right on my heels, the lights snapped off. Pitch dark. Only the faint glow of moonlight cast against the basement steps up ahead. I pulled closer, one painful lurch at a time. Finally close enough, I pushed off the wall and staggered through the open door, falling chin first into the stairs. The thumping sound right behind me. I pushed up, slammed the bunker door shut, and latched the lever down. Another close call. I stood motionless at the door, listening for minutes. Nothing. Dead silence. I looked back over my shoulder. The door at the top of the basement steps was open too. Wide open. Bluish moonlight revealed the foyer above. Why were all the doors left open? I turned and used the railing to pull myself upward. Another painful and tedious slog. Trying my best to be as quiet as possible, but not easy. The last thing I wanted was for Paul to wake up and find me crawling out of his basement with no good excuse. After 10 minutes of painstaking effort, I finally reached the main floor. The familiar smell of vanilla-flavored cigarillos hung in the air. On my hands and knees, I crawled toward the front door, going even slower than before so as not to make a sound, inch by inch. When I finally reached the door, I grabbed a sturdy umbrella from a bucket in the corner and used it to push up to standing, a makeshift cane. No match for a crutch, but it's sure as fuck beat crawling. I reached for the doorknob and froze. A pressure suddenly pushed into my forehead, like a migraine. I rubbed my brow with the back of my thumb, and then stopped and lowered my hand. That was the weird tick. The thing Howie did, the thing Paul did, the thing Mitch did before he... When did I start doing it? Why did I start doing it? I shook it off and reached for the door, but again stopped short. Another recurring question bubbled up from my subconscious. Who is Paul's so-called old friend? Who was the person in the room down the hallway? I peered back over my shoulder, trying to push the curiosity away, trying to just reach for the door and leave, but I couldn't. It was that strange, familiar, almost magnetic pull of needing to know the answers, growing stronger with each passing second. I glanced around the foyer. Where did Paul sleep? Save for the basement, it wasn't a big house. There were only 3 doors in that hallway, and one of them was probably a bathroom. I turned fully around, stepped forward into the foyer, and lurched to another stop. No. It's not safe here. My survival instinct screamed so profoundly that I could almost hear it. Go home! Finally listening to my smarter self, I turned back for the door. Go home and sleep. I turned the knob, and... What if Zach's in the room? There's no possible way. Did the timelines even match up? How old would he even be now? How would police not have known? But if it was Zach, maybe I could get a photo, take it to the law, My feet were bringing me back down the hallway before my head even made up its mind. Thank God the floors were carpeted, or I would have woken up the entire neighborhood. Another painful hobble down the hallway until I reached the door to the mysterious room and froze. I took 3 deep, intentional breaths in and out, then reached for the handle. Locked. I tried again. Still locked. Not sure what I expected. I looked around. The house was quiet, motionless, like everything was on pause, frozen in time to an unnatural degree. A stillness which reminded me of the first night I found the coat rack. The same unsettling quiet in the air. Another weird thing I didn't have time to think about right now. I pulled the switchblade out from my back pocket and shimmied it into the doorframe. I've got a lot of experience with discreetly unlocking doors, but don't ask why. I tilted the knife upwards, pushed forward over the latch, and the foyer light flicked on. My view snapped down the hallway. Footsteps. Footsteps coming from the living room. I staggered backward into the kitchen, just in time. Hello? Paul's voice echoed. How did he get out here? Was he asleep on the couch? I ducked down beneath a bar separating the kitchen from the living room. This was not a good situation no matter how you spun it, especially considering the fact Paul owned a gun. A gun he wasn't afraid to use. Part of me wanted to come out of hiding, explain myself, but at this point it felt like Paul was likely being influenced by the intruder. Possessed, even. Either way, I still didn't know who was in that room. Either way, I still needed to know who was in that room. Hello? Paul's voice echoed down the hallway this time. I huddled further into the shadowy corner, waiting, listening. Paul strode back into the living room. He flicked another light on. A stretch of draining silence followed. He was listening too. He was waiting. A long, silent standoff crawled by. 5 minutes, at least. Nothing but the sound of my own breathing. Then, Paul cleared his throat and moved toward the kitchen, toward me. His footsteps getting closer and closer until... the floor beneath me jostled slightly. Paul was standing on the opposite side of the bar now. If he leaned forward and peeked down, that was it. I held my breath, knife still in hand. Shit. I should have tucked it away earlier. Now I really looked crazy. Crazy and dangerous. Too late now. Paul was close enough to hear even the slightest movement. Another impossibly long silence dragged by. Seconds like minutes. Minutes like hours. Holding my breath, all the while growing tenser and tenser until the switchblade flicked open. My tense grip must have bumped the switch. Stupid fucking idiot. The floor creaked as Paul stepped back from the corner. My head raced 1,000 thoughts a second. Paul huffed and stepped forward again. Suddenly, the tips of his fingers slipped into view, gripping over the edge of the counter above me. The bar top bent and strained as he leaned forward, pressing his weight down against it. Inching closer and closer. Paul was going to peer underneath the counter and see me hiding there, crazy-eyed, sleep-deprived, armed with a knife, and... Somewhere in the house, a phone vibrated against a wooden surface. Paul huffed again. His hands slipped out of view and he strode back into the living room, away from the kitchen. Finally, I inhaled a breath of overwhelming relief. A relief that quickly faded when I realized my situation hadn't changed. He'd come back soon enough, and I needed to be somewhere else when he did. "Mitch?" said Paul, his voice filled with bewilderment. No, it's okay." He was speaking softly now, comforting. Silence. Paul was listening to Mitch now, or whatever it was, claiming to be Mitch on the other end. Who the fuck knew at this point? "You sure it was him?" said Paul. More listening. "When?" More listening. A short pause. "Did you call the police?" Another pause. No, I understand. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Mitch, not right now, but at some point we should at least get some authorities involved, okay? He's clearly not well. Yeah. Okay. I'll meet you there. He strode back into the living room and pulled a jacket on. What in the fuck was going on here? Were they talking about me? Why was Mitch suddenly talking to his supposedly estranged father? Was that even Mitch? There's no way it was. It had to be the intruder messing with Paul. But was that even Paul? My head was exploding with an influx of questions. If the intruder's goal was to make me go insane with confusion and paranoia, mission accomplished. Congratulations. Paul strode down the hallway again. He was coming back toward the kitchen. Fuck! He stopped in front of the kitchen entrance. Standing in the hallway, his back was mostly turned to me. All he needed to do was look slightly to his right, and the jig would be up. Ten long seconds drove by, until finally, he turned toward the mysterious guest room, went for the handle, and locked. Shaking his head, he reached up on top of the door frame, slid his hand across, pulled down a key, and unlocked the door. He cracked it open and peered into the dark room. Mitch called, said Paul. Something happened at his place. Gotta see if he's all right. Back in a few hours, give or take. He pulled the door mostly closed and froze. He pushed it open again. Open or closed? No audible response. Paul locked the door from the inside, pulled it shut, and tucked the key back on top of the door frame. He marched back toward the foyer, flicking off all the lights as he went. Suddenly he froze. Another long silence dragged by, and then the foyer light flicked on again. What was he doing? The answer hit me like a bag of bricks to the face. The door. I forgot to close the door at the top of the basement stairs. In my defense, it was open when I got here, but I doubted that was Paul's doing. I could hear him creep across the foyer and stop. Now I assumed he was at the top of the basement steps, standing in front of an open door that he never left open. He pulled the door shut, locked it, and wandered back into the foyer. Then he started pacing back and forth, pacing circles. Fuck. He muttered to himself, clearly in the middle of a panic attack or something even worse. This continued for 3 long minutes until finally he stormed out the front door and slammed it shut behind him. Silence. Outside, a bike engine turned on, peeled out of the driveway, and sped off. He was gone. Finally. My eyes drifted back toward the guest room door, curiosity burning stronger than ever. But I decided to wait 3 minutes longer, just in case Paul forgot something and came back. 3 minutes went by. I crept out into the hallway. I hobbled to the door, reached up on the frame, slid my hand across, and found the key. Hands shaking, I unlocked the door and stopped. I breathed deep. What if it was Zach on the other side? What if it really was just an old friend of Paul's? What would I do with the knowledge? Was my obsession for answers really pulling me deeper into the intruder's web? I turned my head sideways and placed my ear against the door, the slow and muffled beeping of what sounded like a heart monitor. I leaned back, took a deep breath, turned the knob, and pushed the door open. Gut-wrenching stench hit me like a wall, like rotting food and burnt hair, a smell so strong I could almost taste it. Turning away, I clenched my eyes shut and buried my nose into my inner elbow. I held there until the stench subsided somewhat. I turned back toward the room. Most of it was hidden in shadows, cluttered with military-grade medical equipment, just like the room in my vision. Heart monitors, IV bags, even a table laden with surgical tools. Near the window was a slightly inclined hospital bed. And on the bed lay a man, or at least what I assumed. He was wrapped in medical bandages, medical tubes stuck out of his arms, his wrists, even his legs. Bandages covered most of his face, save for his lower jaw and a small slit for the eyes. I crept forward. The slow, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor remained steady. Whoever it was, they weren't aware of my presence, yet. But I didn't care either way. I needed to know. I reached the side of the bed and stopped. His eyes were clenched shut, as if pretending to sleep. His exposed jaw was scarred and mangled, parts of his lips peeled back, revealing teeth behind. I'm no medical expert, but it looked like a severe burn victim. If this was Zach, I couldn't tell. He would have been so much older by now anyway. But whoever it was, they looked fit for an intensive care unit, not a guest bedroom. Was Paul keeping them here as a guest to ward off the intruder? I couldn't imagine anyone in their right mind agreeing to this willingly. I was about to turn back when, out the hallway, the front door clicked open, and a light flicked on. Paul was back. I cast my view around the room, desperately searching for a place to hide when the man on the bed's eyes snapped open. Cold blue eyes, strikingly similar to Paul's. He was looking straight at me, wide and fearful. Thudding footsteps. Getting closer. Without thinking, I clambered beneath the bed and pulled my cast leg in behind me. Cramped between tangled wires and green metal crates, I hid. The footsteps stopped in the doorway. The bedroom light flicked on. How did you open this? Paul's voice reverberated into the room. No response. What's wrong? Again, no audible response. Paul huffed, flicked the light off, and pulled the door shut, leaving me alone with the burn victim. The burn victim, I'm pretty sure, was Paul. Or at least, some version of him. I recommend measuring the distance from him to the furthest corner of the house. Calculate how long it will take him to reach you. Set up your bedroom as far away as possible. Once established, do not move your bed. You must sleep there from now on. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor kept me from falling asleep. All the while I could hear Paul mulling about around the house, doing God knows what at 4 a.m. This went on for about an hour until finally, silence. Silence and early morning birds chirping awake outside. It was still dark out, but the sun was rising. Another 10 minutes went by until I decided it was safe to leave. Climbing out from underneath the bed, I pushed up to standing. Relief poured through my sore, cramped body. I looked back. The man on the bed was asleep, eyes closed. Of course, maybe it wasn't Paul, but the resemblance, even through the gruesome scarring, was striking. That, and the fact one version of Paul supposedly burned to death. At this point, who else would it be? I needed a photo just in case. I pulled out my phone, and the battery was dead, of course. Tucking my phone away, I turned back and staggered across the room. I placed my ear against the door. I listened. The low hum of the fridge. The occasional drip of a leaky faucet. Okay. I pushed open the door and peered out. Somehow, the hallway was darker than before. Empty, as far as I could tell. I crept out and pulled the door shut behind me. Shimmying against the wall, I made my way toward the entrance. Almost free. Almost home. Pushing off the wall, I stumbled into the foyer and thumped into the front door. A reverberating thud echoed through the house. Fuck! Dread hung in the air as I braced for a response, but nothing came. Only more silence. Relieved, I reached, turned the doorknob, and... fucking locked. From the outside? I pulled my switchblade out and stuck it into the frame. Sliding forward, behind me. Down the hallway. A door clicked open. I looked back over my shoulder. It was the door to the room of Paul's burnt-up doppelganger. Fuck this. I turned back to the door and... Brandon? A voice from the left. I snapped a look. Only the darkened living room. Struggling to pull the knife out from the door, I squinted into the shadows. In the far corner, by a draped-shut window, a silhouette, seated on a couch. Are you okay? The familiar voice from the darkness echoed, for a moment almost sounding like my father. Someone rose to standing and stepped into a beam of pale moonlight. It was Paul, cold blue eyes filled with confused disappointment. His eyes glanced to the wedged knife gripped in my hand and then back to me. Mitch called, he said, trying to stay calm, acting like nothing bad was happening, even though it clearly was. He's worried about you. He took a careful step forward. I flinched, pulled and yanked the knife out from the doorframe. Paul gently raised a hand. We're okay. He stepped back. No need for that. Full disclosure, though, you know I have a 9mm sitting on the table here. He glanced down to his left, a black finish handgun set on top of a stack of books. But there's no reason for any of that. right?" He nodded slightly, as if to answer his own question. I lowered the knife, but I didn't put it away. Maybe seeing an incomprehensible monster crawl out through Mitch's mouth gave me a few trust issues. "Mitch said you were really distressed last night. Said you broke down his door. Ran away in a panic." I shook my head, painfully aware of how crazy I must have looked. "It's okay, Brandon. We're not pressing charges or anything like that. We're worried about you. Have you been sleeping?" I chuckled bitterly, turned back toward the door, and stuck the knife back into the doorframe. I was done playing this game. In my peripherals, Paul stepped over to the table, crouched down, picked up the gun, and tucked it into the back of his waist loop. "Brandon," said Paul, again sounding oddly similar to my late father, the same way Dad's sounded, knocking on my bedroom door after Zach died. "You're letting this get to you. I know what it's like. Trust me. I know better than most." I turned to look at him again. "Why is your door locked from the outside?" Paul shook his head. "It's not, Brandon." I grabbed the handle and turned it to show. What? The door popped open, and the wedge knife clattered to the floor. I blinked confusion, shrugged, held the doorframe, and... "I'm not letting you go, Brandon," said Paul. It sounded more like pleading than a threat. I stopped, looked back toward him, down at the gun. "Are you gonna shoot me?" "No, we're just gonna wait here until help comes." "Help as in cops?" "They're gonna bring you to the hospital, get you some help." "A psych ward?" "They're not like the movies, trust me. I've been in more than a few." I scoffed, a growing sense of bitter spite swelling up in my throat. All the confusion, all the questions, all the vagueness boiled into a twisting mass of rage. "Who's in the fucking room?" Paul glanced down the hallway. "I told you. An old friend." I grit my teeth. "An old friend burned to shit that just so happens to look exactly like you?" "He was injured in the war, Brandon. I'm his caretaker." "You expect me to buy that shit? It's using you. I can see it in your eyes." "Then why am I trying to help you?" I opened my mouth to respond but stopped short, as if the insanity of my own thoughts was too strange even to speak aloud. But I knew he was lying. I fucking knew it! Somehow this version of Paul who burnt alive in the car wreck was also the one in the room down the hallway. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but I knew it was true. Look, Brandon, nothing I say right now is gonna convince you of anything, and that's okay. But I need you to understand that it's just fucking with you right now. Yeah, it's all in my head, right? Well, no, actually. Some of it is real. Well, it has to be. I know. Some things happened to me that I just can't explain, but that doesn't matter anymore. I put that aside and pretended it wasn't real. Good for you, I said, squatting down and picking the knife back up. I turned around for the door, and Paul drew his gun. He didn't aim at me, but he looked ready to fire. You're not gonna shoot me! You're not gonna get far with that leg. He had a point there. Brandon, Paul continued, you've broken and entered with a deadly weapon. But I'm on your side here. Even Mitch is on your side. I huffed, stepped back from the door, and pulled it shut. Paul relaxed and tucked away his pistol. A long stretch of silence. I sighed. Do you actually believe you're in control right now? What? It's using you. I can see it in your eyes. Do you know it? Do you think you're still in there? Paul, at a loss for words, smiled sadly, turned around, stepped back for the couch, and I lurched forward, pushing open the front door in one smooth motion. Scrambling onto the front lawn, Red and blue lights swept over the street ahead. I pushed up to my feet, staggering uselessly across the yard. "Brandon!" Paul called after me, voice filled with protective concern. A cop cruiser skid to a stop on the street in front of me. Out from the passenger seat, a young cop whipped out, took cover behind the door, and drew her weapon. "Get on the ground!" she screamed, gun pointing directly at me. I just stood there, knife in hand, in shock, staring down the barrel of a handgun. "Drop the weapon!" I looked over my shoulder at Paul, his face still filled with fear. Fear for my safety. I knew. I could see it in his eyes. Something slammed into me from the side. A burly cop tackled me into the dirt. The knife sailed from my hand and flew through the air. My head pushed into wet soil and grass. I was pinned down. Sudden realization flooded through me at that point. This meant I would be dragged away to a psych ward, forced to do their tests, forced to take medication, sleeping away from home, breaking the cardinal rule again and again. The intruder gaining more and more influence with each passing night that I spent away from home. A sense of overwhelming dread swarmed through me. With a burst of surprising strength, I kicked and swiped and flailed. Somehow shoving the heavy-set cop off of me, I scrambled, half crawling, half running. A useless attempt. The second cop hauled off the street toward me and sidewalled me back into the ground. Both of them pinning me down now. Dead grass and clumps of dirt filling my mouth, but I didn't care. I kept fighting. It was life or death. I needed to escape. I kept pushing, struggling. "Be careful with him!" Paul's muffled voice cried out, and then a heavy blow cracked against the back of my head, and darkness. 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 I woke up in the head of something not human, but not the intruder either. An animal. A strange and bizarre sensory experience, to say the least. 4 legs. A perspective on the world nearly impossible to explain. Was it a mountain lion? Was it a bear? I didn't know, but I was in a familiar forest, staring down a straight hiking trail. Evening sunlight cast down through the trees above, speckling the snow-covered path with pockets of swaying light. And then I saw myself. Up ahead on the path, dressed for hiking, looking slightly older now, leg fully healed, oblivious to the creature in front of me. This version of me suddenly froze, staring directly toward me now, his eyes filled with terror. He turned to run. Darkness. I woke in a room with greenish walls, cold fluorescent light cast over all. My arm was handcuffed to a bed railing. The room was unfamiliar, but I knew exactly where I was. Emergency room. Psych ward. Fuck. He will begin in the furthest corner of your basement. Paul was right about one thing. Psych wards aren't like the movies. At least, well, this one wasn't. If anything, it felt more like a nursing home. Boring, assisted living with cameras and security guards. No electroshock therapy, no drawn-out talks with stoic shrinks, no evil head nurse. The movies got one thing right, though. Isolation. Especially for the first few days. I was in hysterics, strapped to a bed, screaming about the man in the basement, screaming about how sleeping away from home would make him stronger, give him more influence. Of course, I knew this behavior didn't exactly help my case for appearing sane, but when you're staring down the barrel of a gun, none of that seems to matter. Regardless, I calmed myself down after a few days. A steady cocktail of Seroquel and benzos might have helped too. Now, I had only one goal. Appear sane enough to get discharged, get back home, and hopefully salvage this disastrous transgression. Maybe the intruder would give me some leeway since my being here was involuntary. Wishful thinking. I guess there's one thing the movies get right. The more you try to appear sane, the more insane you appear. It's not easy to pretend things are normal when you believe an ever more powerful hive mind tulpa, whatever the fuck it is trying to absorb you into itself, but I put up a decent show. To be honest, getting stuck in a psych ward is the last place I expected to be. Before this, it seemed like everything was leading up to some vast and terrible revelation. Like I'd finally get the answers to all of my questions. A final, horrific revelation connecting all the pieces nicely together. But now, I was stuck in a borderline nursing home, putting together cat puzzles and playing Uno with strangers. Not exactly the finale I had in mind. The anticlimax of it all was suspect, to say the least. I was still waiting for the hammer to drop, to wake in my room and see a coat rack in the corner. Getting forced into a psych ward changed my view on a lot of things. There was one guy in there, this guy that had OCD so bad he needed 7 cups of water on his bedside table at all times. Each cup needed to be slightly fuller than the last, but he also needed to drink from the 3rd, 4th, and 7th cups every 14 minutes, and then pace around the psych ward 3 times. If he broke the ritual, he was convinced a man made out of paper would climb in through the vents and cut him in half. Shit like that might have seemed funny to me before, in a morbid kind of way, but after seeing it firsthand, after living through something like this, let's just say I don't look at homeless people rambling to themselves on the street the same way that I did before. You see, it's easy to make fun of things that make you uncomfortable. It's not so easy when you're the one going through it. Paul came to visit too, or at least he tried. I didn't sign off the first few times. As far as I was concerned, Paul wasn't Paul. The real Paul was trapped back in his house, barely alive, strapped to a hospital bed and burnt up, almost beyond recognition, a prisoner in his own home. Mitch even showed up once too, but I refused him as well. Mitch wasn't Mitch either. Mitch was dead, a mangled heap of skin on the kitchen floor. Worst of all, I don't even think either of them was aware of it. But I believed that they believed they were actually themselves. Unwitting duplicates. Paul kept trying, showing up every other day. He even covered all my hospital bills out of his own pocket. I was borderline broke, so that was appreciated. Out of curiosity more than anything, I finally gave in. I finally signed off on Paul's visit. We sat down in the common area. Imagine a low-income high school lunchroom, round tables covered in half-finished puzzles, cold vinyl floors with flecks of milky gray. An older woman stood by the window. Rosa was her name. Every 10 minutes or so, Rosa would call out for the nurse. When the nurse showed up, she'd ask them for the time. They'd tell her the time, and she'd thank them. Rinse and repeat. For the last 3 hours straight. After a while, you start to tune out stuff like that. Everything becomes background noise eventually. Finally, the doors pushed open, and in walked Paul. Our eyes met. He smiled sadly, strode across the room, pulled out a rickety chair, and sat down across from me. "How have you been?" I shrugged. He nodded and pulled a brown envelope out from his jacket. He placed it flat down on the table and slid it toward me. "That's not going to answer everything, but it might help you a little." Skeptical, I reached into the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents, papers, photos, ID cards. Paul cleared his throat. That's, everything I could find on my friend in the guest room. Full warning, though. It's a bit graphic. I scanned the first paper. Hospital records, detailing a man named Lawrence Weiser. A photo. A man lying on a gurney in the Vietnam jungle covered in full-body chemical burns. I flipped to the next page. Military legal papers, giving Paul the right to shelter and look after Lawrence Weiser. Clearance to monitor and treat complications sustained due to long-term effects of a wartime injury. I flipped to the next image. A photo of Paul, much younger, was paperclipped to the corner, his arm wrapped around another man's shoulder about the same age. Both of them looked so much alike that they could have been brothers. I kept flipping, more documents, more photos, IDs, birth certificates. If they were fake, Paul would have spent a lot of time and money making them. Maybe the intruder created them out of thin air. I turned the page. More photos of Paul. He was setting up a hospital bed in his house's spare bedroom, military personnel helping out. I put the papers down and looked at him. And? Paul scratched his neck. I know it barely answers anything, but at least it clears up one thing, right? I set the documents on top of the envelope and slid it back across to Paul. I drove to Mitch's apartment. 40 minutes out of town. Saw a fucking fetus monster climb out of his mouth. And then I ran down the hallway and ended up in your basement. Hell, I'm pretty sure my car's still parked out at Mitch's. And you're saying it's in my head? Paul leaned in, nodded understandingly, looked back over his shoulder, made sure nobody was in earshot. It's not in your head, he said, turning back to face me. Like I said, it's only partially in your head. This thing's got a foot in the door between reality and nothing. And if you let it, it'll push that door all the way open and never go back. I scoffed. Why all the runarounds? Why the stupid fucking rules? Paul leaned back in his chair. Mitch and I have different ideas on how to fix it. I figured accepting it's there and living life regardless is the best route. Mitch thinks it wants you to do that. The truth? It's probably somewhere in the middle. Why'd you say I could pass it off then? Paul looked at me, genuinely confused. In the park, I continued, you said I could build a bunker door, pass it off to somebody else? In the park? I looked at him in disbelief. Did he forget? I honestly don't know what you're talking about, Brandon, said Paul. He seemed sincere, but I'd been fooled more than enough by now. In the park! You told me this long, drawn-out fucking story about how you fell in between these boulders, saw a man down between the rocks, told me the intruder dug a tunnel between the houses. A tunnel? Are you serious? Look, Brandon, I don't know who you talked to. But it wasn't me. But that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is you focus on moving past all of this. Focus on getting better. The stronger you are, the healthier your mind is, the less power this has over you. Like I said before, once I stopped drinking, started caring for people close to me, all the crazy shit started going away. Things still happen, don't get me wrong, but I can deal with it now. You learn to cope. How do I know you're even you? You don't. Well, shit, I don't even. But that doesn't matter either. I'm here. I exist. You exist. work with what you know. I didn't respond. How long have you been away from home now? 2, 3 weeks? Has anything happened? Has the intruder shown up in here? Have you died? I didn't answer, but I caught the point. This doesn't make any sense, I said, leaning forward, resting my arms on the table. That's the point. This thing preys off of confusion, addiction, fear, repression, trauma. The more fucked up you are, the better a time it has. I mulled it over, still not convinced. Has the doctor helped? Paul continued. The meds. I gave a reluctant nod. As much as I hated to admit it, things didn't feel as crazy as they used to. I did feel calmer. I felt more stable. But like I said before, this was all too easy. Uncomfortably anticlimactic. The night before I went to your house, I swerved, almost hit a bear, smashed into a roadside post and cracked my head on the driver's side window. I saw things. Experienced things. I saw you. I saw you driving, looking out through your eyes. Paul nodded, as if expecting the point to be raised. I'm not going to say it wasn't real. But it's only snippets of moments, crumbs of conspiracy, just enough to create a narrative in your head that may or may not be real. Enough to keep obsessed. Enough to... I saw you! Driving drunk! You swerved into somebody on a green bike! Hit and run! It seemed like you were trying to cover it up! Paul looked at me with deadly serious eyes. I'd sooner kill myself before trying to cover up something like that, he said, with brutal conviction. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it didn't happen in this world, and it didn't happen to me. Whatever that's worth. Sure, I said, still not fully satisfied. Nurse! Rosa by the window called out again. The staff was ignoring her now. Nurse! Paul looked forward, expecting someone to help. She just keeps asking the time, I said. Paul pulled up his sleeve and checked the time on his watch. 5:58 in the afternoon, he said, smiling warmly toward her. Rosa looked at Paul like he was an angel sent from above. Thank you. Paul nodded and turned back toward me. More silence. I cleared my throat. You and Mitch talking again? Paul shook his head. No. He was just worried about you. Still thinks you're possessed. Something like that. Paul rubbed his jaw. I mean, it's not just that, though. I was a shit father. I nodded. You remind me of my old man sometimes. Shit father too, huh? I almost laughed. No. He was all right. Where is he now? Dead. Ah. I'm sorry. It's okay. What got him? Lung cancer. Same thing that got my dad. In the liver, though. A strange calm came over me, something I hadn't felt since before this nightmare began. A feeling that maybe, despite all its misery, life was worth sticking around for. At least a little while longer. If for nothing else, just to see what happens. We talked about Howie, too. Paul said Howie was always weird, even before the intruder. Maybe he was a servant. Maybe he was an unwitting vessel controlled by the intruder to spy on new recruits. Maybe he was just a weird guy who really liked the color green and crossword puzzles. Maybe some things were better left alone. A bell rang out through the PA system. Dinner will now be served in the cafeteria. Please line up on the marks, maintaining a 6-foot distance from one another. Paul hit the table gently with his fist. Well, I'll stop bugging you now. I forced a smile. Paul stood up. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly here, but If you got the patience. I'd love to swing by and visit every so often. Don't got much else going on anyways. Sure, Paul, I said, still skeptical. Even though I didn't trust him, or anyone else for that matter, I had to admit. His presence made me feel a little less crazy, a little less alone. Besides, any visitor, even a potential vessel of the intruder, was preferable to nobody at all. Take it easy, kid. He smiled again and then strode back for the exit and pushed through the doors. Paul stopped by every single day for the next 2 weeks. We played cards, talked about hockey, politics. Sometimes we'd talk about the intruder too, but less and less every day. Paul eventually brought me somewhat around, convinced me to work with the doctors. What have you got to lose, anyways? A fair point. Paul told me to tell the doctors what they needed to hear, tell them I acknowledged that it was all in my head, even if we both knew that it wasn't entirely true. Say what I needed to say to get out, but don't rush things. Only leave when I felt ready to. Reality is a spectrum. Things in the realm of thought and emotion don't exist or not exist in a binary state. Belief leads to real actions, terrible and beautiful. Why, just look at religion. I'm not a believer myself, but it's pretty staggering the simultaneous beauty and horror created by mythic ideologies. True or not, sometimes it feels like belief itself has more effect on the real world than anything else. I don't know. Maybe the intruder worked in a similar way, molding itself out of belief, trauma, obsession, forcing itself out of the abstract into the concrete. Like a virus of the mind. Who knows? Paul was there the day before my discharge. The doctors had determined I was stable enough to return to public life. I still felt like shit, but now in a normal, constant haze of vague depression and anxiety kind of way, as opposed to a supernatural entity is trying to kill me kind of way. Paul and I played crib in the common area. Best out of 3. He won, as usual. Stretching out his arms, Paul checked the time. Well, I should head out, he said, partially yawning. I'll swing by tomorrow, give you a ride home. Sure. Thanks, Paul. No worries, kid. Paul drove me home the next day. We pulled into my driveway, and sure enough, there sat my car, inexplicably back in its spot, no longer in front of Mitch's apartment. I opened my mouth to ask about it, but stopped myself short. Better leave well enough alone. So, what's next for Brandon? He adjusted the rearview mirror as he spoke. I shrugged. Probably gonna move upstate, to be honest. Yeah? Well, I don't blame you. I haven't checked my email in a while, but pretty sure I'm jobless by now. That kinda just fell off the map. Paul chuckled. Fair enough. Is that a bad thing, though? I mean, not really. Wasn't really my favorite job anyway. What are you gonna do now? I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to school. Maybe I'll start writing again. You write? I used to. And you enjoyed that? Yeah. Why did you stop? No money. Well, if you move, sell the place, that might give you a bit of a cushion, huh? Sure. Now, I'm not saying that's what you should do, Brandon, but if you like writing, then maybe you should at least try for it. If you like something else, shoot for that. It's better than not trying. Trust me. I learned that the hard way. Yeah, maybe, I said, mulling it over. Looking back, this conversation, like many others, was a little strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I'll get out of your hair now, he said. Silence. I reached for the door and stopped. Thanks, Paul, I said, looking back to him. It's hard to know what to say to someone who might have saved your life. You owe me one. he said, cracking a smile. I smiled back, turned away, and unlatched the door. I stepped out, went to close it, and... Oh! One other thing! I froze, pulled the door back open, hunched down to meet his eyes. I know you're planning to move anyways, but... Paul shifted in his seat slightly. It's probably better we keep minimal contact from here on out. Same goes for Mitch. Not sure why, but this thing seems to feed off of us being around each other. I nodded, stepped away, pushed the door shut, and turned back for my house. Paul pulled into reverse, backed across the street, and pulled into his garage. To this day, I don't know if that was even Paul, the intruder, or something in between. All I know is he helped me get back on my feet, so I'm grateful for that. I rifled for my keys, and something caught the corner of my eye. Down the street, parked about 7 houses away, a white hatchback with tinted windows. The same car I'd seen all those weeks ago. I don't know why it grabbed my attention, but it did. It felt almost out of place. Sinister. I shrugged it off, turned away, and opened the door. The smell of cooking hit me. Chicken soup, gravy, and mashed potatoes. Howie humming to himself. I pulled the door shut behind me and was greeted with a bright green, brand new basement door. Do you like it? Howie's voice shot down the hallway. I turned. His bald head peeked out from the kitchen. Yeah, Howie, it's great, I lied. Howie smiled brightly and stepped out into the hallway. Work's picking up again, so it's from my own pocket. The least I could do for you letting me stay here. Thanks, Howie. How have you been? Mitch's dad sort of filled me in a little, and he's apparently not dead? His kid told me otherwise. Some people are so weird, huh? Crazy sketching, I said. What? Nothing. Oh, I've got something! Howie slipped back into the kitchen and appeared on the other side, this time with a crossword book in hand. 9 words, 3rd letter T, last letter M. A naturally occurring yellow-blackish liquid found in geological formations below the Earth's surface. I furrowed my brow. The word was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't quite place it. Howie looked at me again, eyes filling with anticipation. But I shrugged. Huh? Beats me. His eyes filled with disappointment. I'll let you know if it comes to me. Sure, no problem. Howie slumped back into the kitchen and placed down the booklet. He looked like I had just told him his dog died or something. I moved out the next week. Howie offered to stay, pay rent with his newfound income. I agreed. I never did find out exactly what made him leave his old place, but he never brought it up, so I didn't ask. I moved upstate, rented a small studio apartment in a mountain town. Still can't sleep in places with basements, but you can't really blame me on that one. Got back into writing hard, too. Started taking online courses, watching YouTube tutorials, stuff like that. Got my craft to a place where I'm not entirely embarrassed to share it. Weirdly, all these events actually inspired me to start writing again. Of course, all the loose ends, all the unanswered questions still bothered me. Something just felt too convenient about the last few weeks. Like I'd gotten out of the woods too easily. Like the hand of an invisible and benevolent God stepped in and waved away all my problems. Deus ex machina. But sometimes, I wondered if the intruder was still using me, working towards some unknown and terrifying endgame, an endgame which would reveal itself at any moment. Vague anxiety once again lingered beneath everything, like a constant, rising shepherd tone. Something barely audible, sometimes unbearably loud. I did what I could to put it out of my mind, to focus on other things, not pushing it away, just being aware that it's there and gently choosing to focus elsewhere. I'm learning to live with it. Learning to accept the unknowable. I'll admit one thing, though. Coat racks still scare the fuck out of me. Despite all my progress, there was something else I couldn't shake. One question that kept me up at night. What happened to Zach? Was it really what the police said? Just some long-haul semi-truck driver in the night, a terrible accident? But what about the visions of Paul drunk driving, hitting somebody on a green bike? What about the intruder's mimicry murder of Zach, pleading and apologizing? What about the... I stopped myself from spiraling. These questions stuck in the back of my head like splinters of wood stuck between fingers. But even here, I'm learning to live with it. About 6 weeks ago, I decided to look up Zach's mother, just to call her and see how she was doing, see if she was even still alive. It took a bit of work, but I found her. She lived in a care home down in Georgia. I called her on a Wednesday night.
Hello?
She said, her voice sounding almost how I remembered, despite all the years between. Mrs. Serrano?
Speaking.
Hi, I'm not sure if you still remember me or not, but it's Brandon Miller.
Brandon?
Her voice filled with recognition. Yeah.
It's so nice to hear from you, dear. How have you been? It's been so long.
I'm doing all right. We made small talk for a while. Talked about the town I grew up in. Talked about the pandemic, the craziness of the upcoming election. Then the conversation took an unexpected turn.
How's your father doing?
She asked. Oh, he passed away quite a few years back now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I've accepted it now.
Yeah, I understand. I've mostly done the same with Zach. It still hurts. That never goes away. But you learn to live with it.
I didn't say anything. I was lost for words. Silence hung in the air until...
You know, Zach always had trouble making friends before you.
I didn't know that. Zach always struck me as charismatic.
He was a bit of an odd duck, you know, but in a good way. Before we moved, none of the other kids ever really clicked with him. But with you, inseparable.
Yeah. I felt the same way.
How's that?
Not good at making friends.
I remember his passing hit you really hard. You didn't speak for months. Your father was terribly worried about you.
Yeah. I'm doing better now, thankfully.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm sure the closure helped, too. I know it helped me.
Closure? What closure?
Oh, you didn't hear?
Hear what?
A driver, long-haul teamster, came forward a couple of years back. All those years back. He was sleep-deprived, running a cross-state shipment when...
She trailed off. The tragedy spoke from the silence. She took a breath and continued.
This driver, he grew overwhelmed with guilt, came forward 2 years back to confess. I met with him, too. Kind soul, really kind. A sensitive being. Wrong person, wrong place. A terrible mistake.
Where is he now?
He took his own life a few months back. Poor soul. Neighbors found him in a basement corner.
The words basement corner hit me like a concrete wall. Was this connected to the intruder? Was this connected to Paul? Nightmarish thoughts and incomprehensible images raced through my mind. The image of a naked body, pale and decomposing, slumped into a basement corner, a plastic bag wrapped over its head.
Are you there?
said Mrs. Serrano. I stopped myself. I took a deep breath. Set it aside. Don't worry about it. It's a coincidence. I hope his family's okay, I said.
Oh, I do too.
Threads of conspiracy dangled in front of me like fishing lures. This had to be connected somehow. It had to be connected to the rules. What was his name? I asked, almost involuntarily. The driver.
Oh, Mason. Mason Parker, I believe.
Huh. I didn't recognize it. Awkward silence.
Oh, well, it's been lovely hearing from you, Brandon, but game night's about to start, and I can't be late.
Yeah, of course. Be well, Mrs. Serrano.
Take care of yourself. Call any time, okay?
Okay. She ended the call. I sat at my work desk. The glow of car lights beamed in through the window and swiped across the darkened walls. Raindrop shadows stretched across the room and returned into darkness. I took another deep breath, exhaled, doing my best to stay grounded, using a trick I learned from Paul. 3x4. Name 3 things you can see. Bookshelf, white wall, brown desk. Name 3 things you can hear. Rain against the window, tires against the road outside, neighbor's footsteps above. Name 3 things you can feel. The back of my legs against the seat. The warmth of the heater against my shins. The brush of my shirt as I breathe in and out. Name 3 things you can smell. Coffee. Gasoline. Burnt hair. Overwhelming terror pushed up from the floor, into my toes, through my legs, my spine, into my head. A sickening upward swell of chemical dread. A feeling that something truly heinous, something truly evil yet emotionless beyond human understanding was standing behind me. I imagined arms, impossibly long, stretching from the shadows across the room, unnaturally large hands, fingers with extra joints reaching for the scruff of my neck, eager to pull me down through the floor, down through the ground, down through the dirt, beneath the surface of reality itself, trapping me below an invisible barrier, suffocating me underwater with impenetrable surface tension, forcing me to watch, gasping for air, as the world above moved on without me. The world above acted as if I never even existed to begin with. Eternal suffering. I spun around, expecting to see something incomprehensible, but there was nothing. No intruder, no coat rack, no man held together with nails and wire. Just an empty studio apartment. The orange glow of more headlights wiped across. Slow and yawing light crawling over the kitchen, over the front door, over me, like the beams of a deep-water submarine scanning the ocean floor. Everything returned to moonlit darkness. Against the window drapes, a faint, greenish and flickering glow from a neon bar sign across the street. I sniffed the air. The smell of gasoline and burnt hair was gone. Maybe it was never there to begin with. I took another deep breath and exhaled. It's all in my head. It's mostly in my head. But still, the words only rang partially true. If I'd learned anything over the past few months, it was this. Nothing good comes easy. At least, not this easy. As much as I tried to repress it, as much as I tried to ignore it, I knew something was missing. There was some piece of the puzzle that may or may not ever be found. I knew this wasn't finished. I took a deep breath. Turned back to my desk. Popped open my laptop. And started writing.